The northern road unfurled along a jagged, coastal edge, a ribbon of asphalt clinging to the granite and the relentless tide. Evelyn Hart gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, as if the ocean's crosswind might wrest her fingers free and fling her back into the past she'd meticulously avoided for 2 long agonizing years. Mariner's Lighthouse rose from the headland, a stark exclamation punctuating the coastline, a persistent reminder. Here. Here. Remember. The inn nestled below the lighthouse remained unchanged. Its white clapboard siding and blue shutters were familiar, the porch sagging with that charmingly weathered New England grace that spoke of time's weighty, yet welcome passage. She parked beneath a gnarled cedar, the salty air a palpable presence, a living breath against her face. She'd vowed not to cry during her first 5 minutes back, a promise the unforgiving ocean seemed determined to test. Inside, the bell chimed, a small solemn announcement of her arrival. Maeve Whittaker, the innkeeper since before Evelyn had even met Michael, looked up from her ledger. Her hair, now a stormy gray, framed a smile that held the unwavering belief people crave when the forecast is bleak. "Evie Hart," Maeve said, rising and circling the counter with the easy familiarity of family. "You kept the same eyes." "I kept the same promises," Evelyn replied, though the veracity of that statement hung uncertainly in the air. "Room 3? Maeve inquired. It was the room bathed in the gentle afternoon light, a light that never felt intrusive, a space where Evelyn had first agreed to coffee with the man who would become her lighthouse in every storm. Michael Hart had laughed in that hallway, brushed a knuckle lightly against her sleeve as if testing the grain of cherished wood. That was the first day, before the vows, the hospital rooms, and the silence that had learned her name. Maeve slid a brass key across the counter, resting it on a strip of oiled leather. Behind it lay another object, a heavy cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax, imprinted with a small, almost childlike symbol. A half-circle open to the right, a single dot nestled within its curve. Evelyn's breath hitched. The handwriting on the front snagged her, a hook firmly lodged in the titelline of her memories. *Evie. The E and the V leaned into each other, a familiar slant mirroring Michael's lazy, dependable script. "I don't understand," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. Maeve folded her hands, her thumbs tapping a restless rhythm. "It came a year and a half ago. A man delivered it with a note, saying you'd ask for room 3 one day. Said it was from Michael." "From after?" Maeve's face softened, adopting the carefully neutral expression people employ when navigating the treacherous terrain of grief. "He said to hold it." "He looked like a man holding the weather itself," she added, the image both poignant and unsettling. Evelyn cradled the envelope as if the wax might evaporate at any moment, as if the warmth of her palm could melt away 2 years of suffocating silence. The wax seal's impression pressed itself onto her skin. She knew Michael's marks, his carpenter's shorthand, his engineer's precise angles, but this symbol was unfamiliar. Yet, a subtle resonance stirred within her, a memory flickering behind the dominant image of their first date. She slipped the envelope into her coat pocket, feeling its presence like a second heartbeat. Room 3 held the faint scent of lemon oil and aged books. The window framed the lighthouse tower, a mere half-football field away, its pristine white contrasting with a sky perpetually caught between states of being. Evelyn placed her bag on the bed but made no attempt to unpack. She remained standing, the envelope in her hand, weighing the passage of time. Grief, she mused, is a house with locked rooms. You inhabit the kitchen, the hallway, telling yourself it's enough because the doors refuse to yield. Sometimes, though, a key arrives unexpectedly in the mail. She broke the wax seal with her thumbnail. Inside were 2 items. A short note in Michael's familiar script and a small square of thick paper bearing the same enigmatic symbol, this time rendered in pencil. The note read, *Evie, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to keep my end of the easiest promise I ever made. To meet you at the lighthouse on a Tuesday morning and ask you a question I should have asked a second time sooner. I'm sorry I left weather in your hands. Go to where we started. Not the porch. Not the railing. The other beginning. You'll know it by this mark. M. Her hands trembled. The other beginning. How many beginnings were there, really? The cafe on Cedar Street, the lighthouse stairs, the porch where 2 paper cups of coffee had left their telltale rings on a coastal map. She turned the small square of paper. The pencil strokes had softened slightly over the years. The symbol persisted. A word stubbornly lodged on the edge of her tongue. From the window, the keeper's path snaked through the beach grass, a gray braid against the muted landscape. People put love into places, Michael used to say, and places learn the shape of it. She tucked the note back into its envelope and headed for the lighthouse, fearing the paralysis of inaction. The wind buffeted her coat, playful yet insistent. A gull wheeled overhead, letting loose a cry only gulls could understand. The tower door stood open. A plaque proclaimed *Mariner's Lighthouse, 1871. *A newer sign requested a $5 donation. Evelyn stepped inside, allowing the cool, mineral scent to envelop her. Light climbed the ironwork, a living thing ascending a skeletal frame. Closed tours until 1. A voice announced from the shadowed stairwell. A tall man emerged into the shaft of sunlight, his height the testament of years spent in physical labor, his hands bearing the imprint of tools. His face was weathered yet not unkind. "Unless you're here to argue with the Atlantic about policy, in which case I'll fetch you a chair." "I'm here to argue with time," Evelyn said, surprising herself with her own boldness. "I knew the lighthouse long ago." "Long ago happens fast," he replied. "Arthur Bell. Keeper these days when the budget allows keeping." "Evelyn Hart." He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing as if peering through a dense fog. "Hart? As in Michael Hart?" "Yes." Arthur's gaze shifted to the stairs, then to her hands, then finally to the doorway where the wind seemed to whisper its secrets. "We should talk, Mrs. Hart. But not in the echo." He gestured toward a small keeper's room off the entry, where a pot of coffee sat warming on a hot plate that had likely outlasted several marriages. They sat at a scarred table overlooking the spiral staircase. The coffee tasted like the last vestige of goodness on a difficult day. Arthur wrapped his hands around his mug, demonstrating a silent lesson in resilience. "He came by," Arthur said. "Not long before the accident. He asked about an old visitor ledger. The very first one, 1871 to 1890. He said he needed to see one page." "What page?" "The one that isn't there anymore." Evelyn felt a disorienting shift, as if the sea had subtly reached in and displaced a foundational stone. Why would Michael care about a ledger from the 19th century? Arthur's laugh was low and weary. "Because the past is the only thing that breaks laws more than the sea does." He had a mark he was chasing. Looked like half a circle with a dot. Evelyn set her mug down, not a drop spilled. Arthur observed this steadiness, nodding as if cataloging both the tremor and the discipline that kept the cup upright. "I have the same mark," she said. "He sent it to me." Arthur's expression shifted subtly, a quiet display of respect. "Then I'll show you something you'd have found if the county hadn't gone and lost its history to a budget cut and a careless intern." He led her up 2 flights of stairs, their footsteps ringing out in the confined space. On the second landing, he reached behind a framed photograph of the lighthouse circa 1902. Horses and lanterns, men with faces etched like weathered rope, and produced a large leather-bound book as if removing a heart from a chest. "County audit says this book doesn't exist," he stated. "But a thing can keep existing if it stays where it belongs." He opened the book to a page with a neatly torn edge. In the margin of the preceding page, someone long ago had penciled the same small symbol, half-circle, dot in the bowl. Evelyn touched the page, feeling the ghost of time. "That's Michael's mark," she whispered, though she sensed it predated them both. Arthur shook his head. "Older. Sailors used it. Means a thing I'll tell you when I'm sure you'll want to know it." He closed the book gently. "Mrs. Hart, Michael asked me a question in this room, with a wind much like today's. He said, 'If you had one page missing between 2 that tell the truth, what would you guess about the man who tore it?' What did you say?" I said, He either feared what it would prove or loved what it would protect. Michael said, "Sometimes those are the same." Evelyn rose, sitting suddenly feeling inappropriate for bearing such weighty information. "What else did he ask?" "To ring the bell," Arthur said. "To make a noise that couldn't be ignored." The council was set to vote on selling the headland to some outfit dressed like a neighbor and financed like a storm. He wanted the town awake. Arthur's mouth twisted wryly. Storm bells wake dead arguments. He returned the ledger to its hiding place and looked at her, as if measuring the atmospheric pressure. "I don't know what's in your envelope, Mrs. Hart. But I know this. There are places where the past and the present take turns being the floor. If you're going to walk here, you should pick a step and keep it." "I need to go to the cafe on Cedar Street," Evelyn declared, a sense of purpose solidifying within her. Arthur nodded once. "Tell Maeve to pack you a sandwich. Weather gets between a person and lunch if you let it." Outside, the sky brightened in an oblique way, signifying nothing truly resolved. Evelyn felt the envelope against her ribs, a compass guiding her. The other beginning Michael had written. Not the porch. Not the railing. Her hands instinctively sought her pockets, seeking directions. She began her descent toward town, the path seemingly pulling at her ankles, remembering her gait. At the path's bottom she paused. A pickup truck idled across the road, its driver gazing out at the sea with the stillness of someone not contemplating the ocean at all. As Evelyn stepped off the curb, the driver's eyes briefly flicked to her, then away, a single indecipherable movement. A small sticker on the bumper caught the light, a corporate logo attempting and failing to appear locally sourced. She continued walking. Grief, she reflected, had imparted many lessons, the most valuable being the distinction between fear and focused attention. Today she decided she would allocate the appropriate response to each. The bell buoy in the channel tolled, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. The lighthouse remained behind her, both watching and not watching simultaneously. Evelyn pushed open the cafe door, ready to confront the first day of the remaining truth. The bell above Cedar Street Cafe's door didn't ring. It sighed a weary exhale. The cafe was a collection of mismatched tables and a chalkboard that took itself seriously only in its pronouncements regarding blueberry pie. A slightly askew photograph of the staff hung near the register. In the center stood a younger Evelyn and Michael, paper cups raised in a gesture of nascent, uncertain happiness. "Evie." The voice emerged from behind the espresso machine, where steam seemed to imbue people with a certain mythical quality. Rosa Delaney, the owner, wiped her hands and came around the counter. She smelled of flour and a life dedicated to nourishing others. "You haven't aged," Evelyn lied, the polite falsehood hanging in the air. Rosa snorted. "I've aged like a good pan. Come here." They embraced, a hug that encompassed the presence of a ghost, making space for what wasn't there. When they sat, Rosa placed 2 mugs on the table, precise as chess pieces. The coffee was better than its appearance suggested. The pie exceeded all expectations. "Arthur called," Rosa said. "Says you have a mark and a letter and the kind of face women get when the wind changes direction. Arthur is still Arthur. God love him." Evelyn retrieved the small square of paper from her pocket and placed it on the table. Rosa leaned closer. "Michael had that drawn in his notebook. He gave me a sticky note with it, said if you ever came back I was to give you something. Then that sticky note went missing. I thought I'd lost my brain." Evelyn's shoulders rose, not quite a shrug, more a wave questioning whether the shore remained in its accustomed place. "Michael came here?" "After. A week before," Rosa said softly. "Said he was here about the vote. Said he wanted to do one right thing that could hold up a lot of other right things." She slid open the small drawer beneath the counter and retrieved a key on a red string. "This opens the basement records closet. We keep old flyers, meeting notices, weird stuff people leave behind. If you want to go dig, I'll keep anyone from asking you whether you take your scones with cream or apology." Evelyn smiled despite the tightness in her throat. "Thank you." The basement smelled of the accumulated scent of paper that had absorbed the sound of voices for decades. She unlocked the records closet and pulled the chain for the bare bulb. Boxes, binders, and faded bake sale posters filled the space. On a shelf at eye level lay a thin black notebook secured with a rubber band. On its corner the small mark, penciled recently added. Inside were meeting notes, copies of letters to the town council, sketches of the headland with meticulous measurements annotated in Michael's familiar script, and a list of names. At the back a printed email, Noah Quinn to Michael Hart, with the subject line ledger page. A paragraph was heavily redacted with a thick marker. Beneath the black, Evelyn could discern the faintest imprint of the original letters. Noah's phone number was written at the top. She was turning the notebook to decipher the obscured text when the basement bulb flickered. Footsteps sounded above, followed by the sighing bell. Rosa's muffled voice was answered by a deeper tone. The desire for silence overwhelmed the impulse for bravery. Evelyn slipped the notebook into her coat, locked the closet, and ascended the stairs without betraying her presence with the sound of her heels. At the top, a man stood too close to the door to be a mere customer. He wore a jacket bearing a local logo on the chest, his smile engaging only the lower half of his face. He glanced at Evelyn as one might check a reflection in a window. "Can I help you?" Rosa asked him, her tone as dry as pie crust. "Looking for donation cans," he replied. "Council wants to make sure no one's misleading folks." Rosa gestured with her chin to a tin on the counter. "The only thing misled here is my patience. Anything else?" He touched his cap with 2 fingers and departed. The bell sighed in relief. Rosa watched him go, then turned to Evelyn. "I don't like the way weather's standing up today." Evelyn nodded and slid a business card across the counter. "I have to call this man. Noah Quinn." Rosa read. "He's the reporter with the conscience that still thinks it's 1995. Maybe that's the year I need." Rosa grabbed another mug from the shelf. "Then let's pour it." Noah Quinn met her on a bench overlooking the harbor, his notebooks nestled in a messenger bag more patched than stylish. He was around 30, earnest in a way that could prove either beneficial or perilous, depending on one's approach. "You're Evelyn Hart," he said, not a question, but a declarative statement towards which the day had been steadily building. "You wrote to my husband." "I did." His gaze flitted to the lighthouse, then back. "And he wrote back. Enough to get me in trouble, not enough to get him out of it." Evelyn showed him the mark. Noah's shoulders relaxed, as if a tense muscle had finally received the necessary instruction. "It's called a harbor mark," he explained. "Old sailor cipher. Means safe water in sight, or depending on the chart, seek protection." Michael found it in the visitor ledger. He thought someone tore out the page because it proved the lighthouse was historically designated as a navigational aid and a communal refuge, which would make the headland unsellable under state law. Then why not just say so at the council? "Because the records were burned last winter," Noah said softly. "City shed late night." The official line. Heater sparked it. The unofficial line. "A man with clean boots smelled like gasoline." Michael had a copy of the ledger page. "He told me he hid it where the mark would make sense." "Where safe water in sight would make sense," Evelyn repeated, savoring the phrase's inherent implications. Noah pointed towards the lighthouse. "He told me to listen for a bell when I was ready to understand. I didn't know what that meant until the day the keeper rang it and the whole town walked uphill." Evelyn recounted her encounter with Arthur, the missing page, and the letter that urged her to find the other beginning. Noah listened without interruption, a rare and precious act. "Mrs. Hart," he said finally, "I think your first date isn't the beginning Michael meant." "I think so too," she said, surprising herself with her unwavering conviction. "I think it's the moment before the date. The reason for it." They walked the headland together as afternoon yielded to evening. At the base of the tower, where a ring of granite blocks met the grass, Evelyn's shoe stumbled. She looked down. Someone years ago, softened by the elements, had carved the half-circle and the dot into the block facing the sea. Noah knelt, tracing the inscription with his fingers. "Michael didn't carve this," he said. "It's old." which means he recognized it. Evelyn crouched beside him. The wind tousled her hair. The other beginning, she repeated. Somewhere that was a refuge before it was a date. Noah straightened, his eyes scanning the path. There's a bench near the cliff, half hidden by beech rows. People miss it because the view is wrong. The bench looks inland. Michael called it the backward seat. They found it. A simple plank nestled between boulders, its iron legs rusted with the patina of time. From this vantage point the lighthouse was framed by the inn and the town, not the sea. On the underside of the plank someone had etched, not carved but carefully scored, the harbor mark. Evelyn slid a hand beneath the seat and felt metal. The cold, unwavering promise of a hidden latch. She pressed the dot within the mark. Something clicked. The plank tilted, revealing a narrow compartment cut into the wood, lined with old wax paper as if someone had constructed a drawer for a rainy day. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a single fragile page. Handwriting in an aged script identified it as * visitor ledger, Mariner's Light, October 3, 1874. The text detailed a storm, refugees from a grounded ship, townspeople seeking shelter in the lighthouse, and the council declaring the tower a public refuge from the sea in perpetuity. Evelyn held the page like a relic, a tangible vow. Footsteps crunched on the sand behind them. Noah turned. The man from the cafe doorway approached, his smile fixed like a knife tucked into a napkin. "Afternoon," he said casually. "You folks finding what you need?" Evelyn remained motionless. Noah subtly positioned himself a half step in front of her. "We found enough," he stated. The man's gaze shifted to the oilcloth, then to Evelyn's hands. "Then I'll relieve you of it. Wouldn't want a misunderstanding to lead to heartbreak." "Too late," Evelyn said, her voice unwavering. Noah's phone was already raised, recording. "Care to repeat that for the paper?" he asked. The man's smile remained unchanged. He reached too quickly and Noah sidestepped. A brief scuffle ensued, a small eruption of sand. The oilcloth slipped from Evelyn's grasp, catching momentarily on the plank before she secured it more firmly than fear had ever dictated. She stood, the page tucked securely into her coat. She inhaled deeply, a breath with a clear destination. "Walk away," she instructed the man. "You can't own what the town already is." For a moment the air seemed to weigh its options. The man raised his hands in a theatrical surrender that convinced no one and retreated down the path. Noah exhaled, the tension leaving his body. "That will not be the last time we see him." "No," Evelyn said. "But the next time he sees us he'll see the town." She looked at the lighthouse, the bench, the inn window reflecting a rectangular slice of sky. The other beginning was not a porch, not a railing. It was a place where people protected each other. Michael had understood this about love and about the law. Perhaps he'd kept the secret because revealing it would necessitate admitting what he feared. That he had returned to complete something begun on the day they met, and that he might not get to finish it with her. The council scheduled the vote for Thursday at 7 p.m. In the old gym, ample space for people and the weather that might accompany them. Noah placed the ledger page in a fireproof pouch, then into a safe at the Gullhaven Gazette, under the unblinking gaze of a ceramic seagull crafted in a night class. Evelyn kept a copy, along with the harbor mark symbol. She delivered them to Arthur, who examined both, then looked at her, as if recognizing someone he'd been anticipating. "Time to ring the bell," he declared. He waited for low tide, when sound carried like a rumor with nimble feet. The first peal rolled over the town, startling the gulls from their perch. Doors opened. Men and women and teenagers who'd learned the taste of salt before their multiplication tables emerged, shielding their eyes from the sun, and the second peal guided them to their destination. On the hill, Evelyn stood near the lantern room door. The bell's resonant sound filled her with a sense of conviction. She thought of Michael's final diary, which she had yet to open, the act of preserving it a testament to her belief in the future, and the small note he'd left in the cafe for a stranger to safeguard. How he had orchestrated this sequence of events, how grief was merely the absent conductor in the orchestra's opening movement. Arthur lowered the rope and rubbed his hands together. That sound, he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice, reminds people what they're for. What are we for? Evelyn asked, her voice a quiet query. Keeping, he said simply, of light, of each other. By evening, flyers bearing the harbor mark adorned lampposts, church bulletin boards, and even slipped beneath mugs at the cafe. Rose's chalkboard read, *blueberry pie and bell night. Tell the council which way the wind blows. At dusk, the man in the locally branded jacket watched from a truck parked at the edge of the lot. Another car idled behind him, its windows dark. The lighthouse stood defiant against the sky, refusing to diminish its presence. Arthur handed Evelyn a small brass key. This opens the lantern room, he said. Michael was going to ask me to let him up after the vote. He said he had a question to ask where the light could hear it. Evelyn closed her fingers around the key. Then we should take his question with us. She and Noah walked toward the gym together. Rosa locked the cafe behind them, a blueberry pie tucked under her arm, both a peace offering and a subtle threat. People moved in small groups. The harbor bell buoy marked the passage of time. In her coat, the envelope containing Michael's letter pressed its familiar square against her body. She didn't need to reread it to recall its contents. Inside the gym, the council members sat at a long table, pretending the folding chairs provided any semblance of comfort. The company representative, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, offered a smile that strained to appear reasonable. The man from the cafe leaned against the back wall, a human embodiment of a problem with a name. Noah initiated a live stream. Arthur took a seat near the center aisle, removing his cap with a practiced ease. Rosa placed her pie at the end of the council table, accompanied by paper plates, and wrote in chalk on the tin, "For truthful mouths only." When the gavel struck and the microphone shrieked a piercing feedback, Evelyn didn't wait for a formal invitation. She strode to the lectern, placed a copy of the ledger page upon it, and addressed the microphone as if speaking to a single, undecided individual. My name is Evelyn Hart. I returned to the place where my husband and I first met because love demands that we reaffirm our promises in the very place we initially made them. This wasn't what she'd scripted on her note card. It was considerably better. She raised the page for all to see. On October 3, 1874, this town declared the Mariner's Lighthouse a public refuge in perpetuity. That means for as long as we're here to bear witness. The original records were destroyed by fire. This document survived. We discovered it precisely where it belonged, beneath a bench, a silent reminder that the future's success hinges on the past having a seat at the table. A murmur rippled through the room, a collective settling as people absorbed her words. The company seeking to purchase the headland asserts there's no legally binding historical designation, she continued, her voice gaining strength, claiming their sole intention is to enhance coastal access. Their true aim, however, is privatization. What they've overlooked is that the lighthouse isn't merely a structure they can own. It's a promise the town made to itself, a testament to its enduring values. Noah adjusted his phone's angle for optimal recording. Arthur leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his attention riveted on Evelyn. Rosa crossed her arms, a subtle tight-lipped smile playing on her lips. The company representative raised a hand, seeking the chair's attention. Madam Chair, he interjected smoothly, while this narrative is undeniably poignant, we require verifiable proof of authenticity. An unverified document could be construed as a theatrical performance. Evelyn was prepared for this challenge. She nodded to Noah, who presented a frame showcasing a magnified image of the lighthouse ledger's binding pattern, meticulously aligning with the torn edge of the page. A perfect forensic match. Observe the unique stitching, Noah explained. It's as distinctive as a fingerprint. We possess the matching binding book. It was kept by the lighthouse keeper in careful preservation. Arthur rose to his feet. And I can attest to its authenticity under oath, under the very bell of the lighthouse, and under my mother's watchful eye. May her tolerant soul rest in peace. The representative's smile tightened, its affability dissolving. Even so, he countered, the council must weigh the economic advantages. Job creation, increased tax revenue, infrastructure improvements. Rosa tapped the pie tin. Your representative attempted to intimidate a grieving widow on a public bench, she remarked casually. You don't get to invoke infrastructure. As if it were a sacred right. Laughter erupted, not malicious but sharp and incisive. The chair surveyed the assembled crowd, her gaze shifting from the page to the lighthouse visible through the high windows, where the first rays of evening light cast a steady glow. The motion to sell is tabled, she announced, her voice clear and firm. Pending a comprehensive state review. The man leaning against the wall straightened up. The representative whispered to a colleague, leaving 2 words suspended in the air, a menacing weather pattern of their own. For now. Evelyn exhaled, then held her breath. A temporary victory is a pivotal moment, not a final resolution. Outside, the night air held a refreshing honesty. Noah escorted her to the base of the lighthouse. Arthur waited patiently, cap in hand, appearing as if he'd been carved from the very stone a century ago, recently granted permission to move. Go on, he said softly, placing a brass key into her palm, as if returning a syllable of her name. Ask the question with him. They ascended to the lantern room, the sounds of their breath mingling with the metallic scent of iron and the creak of a structure that knew how to bear weight. The light rotated, steady and unwavering like a solemn vow. Evelyn retrieved the envelope and slid out the smaller square within. The harbor mark caught the beam, projecting a miniature reflection onto the glass. Michael, she whispered, her voice steady, purposeful. I'm here. From somewhere below, the bell buoy tolled, a low, resonant sound like a human heart reconsidering, then reaffirming its decision. She pressed her palm against the cool glass. We began here, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But our journey also started beneath a bench built for those who look to the past to guide their future. I will preserve this place with the same unwavering resolve you cherished in me. During those days filled with coffee, curtains, and the stubborn tendrils of my hair. I will keep it with you, without you, and because of you. Noah stood back, his gaze lowered, maintaining the respectful distance of a friend who recognizes a prayer when he hears one. Arthur watched the beam inscribe its lesson onto the darkness. Evelyn lowered her hand. Tomorrow, she declared, we uncover the rest. And the lighthouse, a place of beginnings, new beginnings, and the ephemeral weather in between, maintained its vigil, its light unwavering, not to dispel the darkness, but to illuminate one's position within it. Morning arrived, painted in a crisp, azure blue that made promises it couldn't keep. Evelyn and Noah enjoyed their coffee on the inn porch, the wood resonating beneath their feet, while gulls engaged in petty theft with the enthusiasm of eager interns. Rosa had sent over cinnamon rolls of epic proportions. The town had slept poorly and awakened with strongly held opinions. Noah spread newspaper clippings and printouts across the table, resembling a map he'd been sketching since childhood. The company calls itself Seaforth Coastal, he stated, tapping a page. But it's a front 3 layers deep. The parent company is Heliotrope Holdings, registered in Luxembourg, with shadowy connections to Malta. The same pattern emerged in a European port scandal 8 years ago. Forged safety inspections, a storm, and 3 fatalities. He slid a photograph across the table. A younger Michael, his hard hat tilted back, laughing in the face of inclement weather. The caption identified him as a senior contractor on a harbor rescue retrofit project in Brittany. Michael told me he once worked for the wrong harbor with the right intentions, Noah recounted. I assumed it was a metaphor. It wasn't. Evelyn traced the outline of Michael's face with a fingertip, barely touching the paper. He never lied, she whispered. But he was adept at revealing the truth in fragments. Noah nodded. After Brittany, he worked in the United States under his own name. When Seaforth began showing interest in Gullhaven last year, he recognized Heliotrope's hallmark. He contacted me, stating he'd seen this scenario unfold on a different coastline. The missing ledger page was his safety net. Evelyn gazed toward the lighthouse, its stark white structure standing defiant. "He came here to stop them," she affirmed, not as conjecture or dramatic storytelling, but as an undeniable truth that had forcefully asserted itself into the world and stood there unashamed. "Mrs. Hart," Noah said gently, "he also came to propose to you. Arthur told me he had a key engraved with your initials." He paused, his voice laced with empathy. "There's a second personal thread here." He was weaving both narratives together. Evelyn took a sip of her coffee, finding solace in its warmth, and placed the cup down, as if signifying an agreement. "Then we continue weaving." Both. A car passed by, its speed slow enough to count the lug nuts. The driver, the same man in the locally branded jacket, feigned interest in the bay. His performance was unconvincing. Noah gathered the papers. "I'm meeting a source at the pier," he said. "You should investigate the pass where the past prefers to hide." "And where is that?" Evelyn inquired. Noah grinned. "In the hallways where people hang pictures to conceal doors." The inn's hallway was redolent with the scent of lemon oil and age-old secrets. The walls displayed a family album of summers. Families squinting in the sun, teenagers hoisting lobsters like trophies, the lighthouse ever present, performing its unassuming task in every season. Evelyn let her feet guide her. They halted before a familiar photograph. Michael and Evelyn on the porch, cups in hand, sharing a private joke. Maeve materialized beside her, as if summoned by a benevolent director. "You two were trouble," Maeve remarked fondly. "The kind that inspires old women to bake double batches." Evelyn touched the frame. It wobbled slightly, almost imperceptibly. She removed it from the wall. The nail hole was elongated, a telltale sign of repeated removal and rehanging by someone who wished they'd been more careful. Behind the picture, a thin seam in the wallpaper formed a faint diagonal line. "Maeve?" Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible. Maeve's eyebrows rose, mirroring the height of a lighthouse. She produced a butter knife with the practiced ease of a woman who had extracted countless truths from baked goods. Together they gently peeled back the edge of the wallpaper. Beneath, someone had placed a flat envelope, the size of a handbill, its back marked with. There it was, the harbor sign, the pencil markings faded but persistent. Evelyn carefully removed the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, not brittle like the 19th century ledger, but thick and creamy. A page cleanly torn from a guest book. A familiar hand, her own, had written, "We met where the light begins." The date corresponded to their first visit, penned with the flourish she remembered from her younger days. Below it, a second hand, neater, more squared, had added, "We met where the light forgives." Michael's. But something else had been added later, in a third hand that unsuccessfully attempted to mimic hers. A line squeezed between the others, written in darker ink, with unnatural pressure. "And where it can be bought." Evelyn felt the shudder of violin string experiences when a discordant note is played. "That's not my handwriting," she declared. "The slant is wrong. The T's aren't crossed the way I crossed them." Maeve peered closely. Someone attempting to fabricate proof that the headland was always for sale, she surmised. Or to sow doubt about the lighthouse's significance to you. Evelyn carefully folded the page. Whoever had altered it wasn't simply defacing history. They were trying to make a love story complicit in their deception. "I need to show Noah," she said, her voice firm. "And Arthur. And the council, when they pretend to not recognize their own handwriting." Maeve placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Be careful, Evie. People who believe everything has a price don't like the word perpetuity. It gives them hives." As Evelyn stepped out into the midday sun, the envelope tucked securely beneath her coat, the air held a different temperature. The kind of warmth that precedes the arrival of a distant storm, a storm's far-off cousin texting, "On my way." A pickup truck followed her on Cedar Street, trailing like a shadow that had learned to drive. The road leading to the north cliff wound along ledges and scrub. The drop to the rocks was the kind that prompts warnings on signs, warnings often removed by the wind when it uses the signs as playthings. Evelyn maintained a reasonable speed until the pickup closed the distance inappropriately. The driver remained just out of view in her rearview mirror. A slight nudge on a curve, subtle, like the beginning of an argument. Another more forceful, like a man seeking to induce fear in the car ahead. She refused to give in to his intimidation. She gripped the steering wheel firmly, maintaining control, and guided her car along the inside curve as a trusted friend would. At the turnout above the backward seat, she braked sharply, pulled over, switched off the engine, and stepped out into the wind as if summoned to a duel. The pickup idled at the entrance to the turnout. The driver's window remained rolled up. His smile pressed white against the glass. Then he reversed slowly, deliberately, and departed. It took Evelyn a full minute to notice her trembling knees. They were knocking politely, as if reluctant to interrupt. She took deep breaths until the trembling subsided. Then she walked the narrow path down to the bench, crouched, and checked the hidden compartment, though she knew the ledger page was safely stored elsewhere. Empty. Good. Back in town, she sought solace and shared her fear at the only place where fear was legally obligated to purchase pie. Rosa listened attentively, her hands flat on the counter, her wrists resembling tiny battlements. Time to involve Arthur, Rosa declared, and to examine Michael's belongings with an eye for detail. They opened the sea chest Michael had kept in room 3's closet, cedar-lined, scarred, its brass corners burnished by the passage of time. Inside, his tide charts, an old mariner's compass, a length of rope tied in an intricate knot he'd once taught her, and a nautical chart rolled and secured with a rubber band, its oilcloth crackling softly like self-assured confidence. They unfolded the chart on the bed. Evelyn recognized the coastline and depth soundings. She didn't recognize the penciled annotations. Michael had marked 3 small harbor symbols along a line starting at Mariner's Light, veering offshore to Gull's Tooth Reef, then returning to a cove marked Sable Mouth. Between the symbols, Michael had written letters as if communicating with himself. Safe, keep, hold. Arthur arrived, carrying the scent of salt and a thermos he'd likely filled on the day. He was born and replenished ever since. He bent over the chart and whistled softly. Your husband was clever, he remarked. Those markings align with an old wreck route documented in a keeper's log destroyed in the fire. Lifeboats ferried from the reef to Sable Mouth guided by a bell. Safe water in sight was the signal from the tower. If Michael retraced this route, he was indicating the location of a cache. A cache of what? Noah asked from the doorway, his messenger bag slung across his chest like a bandolier of curiosity. Evidence, Arthur responded simply. Or an apology he intended for the ocean to safeguard until you claimed it. Evelyn placed her hand on the chart, not to erase but to steady herself. He trusted the water, she murmured. He trusted me to interpret the currents. We'll need a boat, Noah stated. And discretion. And a tide that behaves itself. Arthur smiled. I know a skiff that owes me favors. But we can't go at noon when every rumor has eyes. Night water keeps confidences. Rumor had been busy while they planned. By late afternoon, flyers announced an emergency council session, not to revive the sale, that would appear clumsy, but to approve temporary construction easements for coastal erosion control. The kind of paperwork that becomes a barrier if signed in sufficiently small print. They'll exploit the headland's vulnerability with a temporary measure that never learns to leave, Rosa commented, stacking to-go cups with quiet fury. Classic tactic. I had a boyfriend like that in '98. The gym reeked of old sweat and the fresh, determined kind people bring to a room united by a singular purpose. The company representative had upgraded his suit and his smile. The man with the locally branded jacket carried a clipboard, likely to make his hands appear occupied rather than avaricious. State observers sat on the sidelines, resembling teachers summoned for a math class they hadn't prepared for. Evelyn stood once more. She didn't bring the original ledger page. Noah had that safely protected, treated like a sacred relic, but she brought the guestbook page and the altered line. She also brought the nautical chart copy, with Michael's harbor markings traced in bold black ink. We keep hearing, she began, her voice ringing with quiet strength, that the headland requires rescue, that the only way to prevent the sea from swallowing our homes is to permit Seaforth to drill temporary kindness into our rock. But here's another truth. Someone altered a record to make it seem our lighthouse is for sale. Someone followed me on a cliff road and suggested I might consider the consequences of a long drop. She held up the guestbook page. The murmur this time was edged with teeth. The chair banged her gavel not to rebuke, but to remind the room of her authority. I'm submitting this as evidence, Evelyn declared. And this. She presented the chart. A map my husband drew, retracing a historic rescue. He marked safe water in sight at 3 points corresponding to a shipwreck account we no longer possess because someone burned down the paper shed in January. We aren't making decisions in a vacuum. We're making decisions within a crime scene. The company representative leaned toward his microphone as if romance were about to unfold. Mrs. Hart, tragedy has fueled your imagination. The state's erosion control program is well established, and temporary easements become permanent. Noah interrupted smoothly, as polite as a saw. He approached the second microphone. We have emails from Seaforth contractors discussing how to convert temporary easements into development corridors. We have suspicious burn patterns the fire marshal will be very interested in re-examining. And we have, thanks to Mrs. Hart, a line of inquiry that spans state lines and oceans. The state observers exchanged glances. Their lack of smiles was a positive sign. In the back row, a teenage boy, Rose's nephew, leaned forward, his shoulders tight with the burden of a promise he'd made to keep. His eyes met Evelyn's. He moved to the aisle, his breath shallow, and pressed something small and plastic into her palm as she stepped down. A flash drive, black with a harbor mark scratched into its casing as if by a key. He asked me to give it to you, the boy whispered. I tried a year ago, but the man in the jacket kept appearing. I hid it in the cafe's ductwork. Don't tell Aunt Rosa or she'll fumigate my soul. Who? Evelyn asked. Michael, the boy replied, and retreated to his seat as if courage had playfully ducked behind its own joke. Arthur raised his hand and, when recognized, spoke in a voice that had been intertwined with the lighthouse bell for so long it rang when he did. Madam Chair, with state observers present and evidence of altered records and attempted intimidation in this town's blood, I propose we reject all easements until the review is complete. Let the ocean do its work and let us do ours. The chair looked over the room, at the lighthouse through the high windows, and at the flash of a gull that mistook democracy for bread. Motion carried, she announced. Unanimous. Outside, the wind had found its purpose. The emergency session didn't cause the storm. It merely chose to coincide with the storm's arrival. Night fell like a tarp hastily thrown down. Evelyn, Noah, and Arthur hadn't reached the pier when sirens sliced through the air. Smoke billowed from the boat sheds, swift and thick, the color of unwelcome news. By the time they reached the water, a shed near the end of the row had become a blazing inferno with its own opinions. Storage for the Historical Society, Noah stated, coughing. They relocated what remained there after the January fire. Old maps, oral history tapes, the kind of things people can't fathom anyone hating. Rosa arrived with a crate of bottled water, and a face reflecting the unpredictability of weather, deciding to take things personally. Volunteers formed a line with buckets because even in the age of water pressure, human hands still carried significance. Arthur barked orders with the amiable ruthlessness of a man who knows precisely how to preserve what can be salvaged and how to regard what cannot be without apologizing to the laws of physics. The shed collapsed with a sound like grammar surrendering. Sparks danced across the pier toward another door. Rosa extinguished them with her boots. Don't you dare, she warned the flames, addressing them like a mischievous nephew. Evelyn's eyes welled up with tears, mirroring the reaction of everyone present. In the flickering light of flames and emergency vehicles, she saw him, the man in the jacket, meticulously neat, recording video on his phone with the concerned frown evil adopts when it seeks to be mistaken for leadership. Noah's messenger bag vibrated. He pulled out his phone, read a message, and went still. My source, he said, his voice low. He works nights at Seaforth's satellite office. He says their fixer, our friend at the cafe, ordered a reset after the vote. Clean the record. Stifle the rumor. They're not even bothering with poetic finesse. The firefighters executed their practice dance with the blaze until it had no more music left. Steam ascended like a weary ghost. Soot transformed noses into war paint. The Historical Society director stood with a waterlogged archive box in his arms, staring at it as a man might stare at a family Bible pulled from a river. "We scanned some of it," he said to no one and everyone. "Not enough." Arthur placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll create new history and safeguard it where water won't seek it." Evelyn clutched the flash drive in her pocket more tightly. If paper could be made to vanish, so could men's confidence. But a file residing in countless locations becomes a story even fire finds tedious to pursue. "Let's go," she said to Noah and Arthur, "before the night develops more schemes." Back at the inn, the three of them sat side by side on the floor of room 3, like children who discovered the grown-up's attic and decided to read aloud. Evelyn plugged the flash drive into Noah's laptop, her hands needing the work. The folder structure was both simple and heartbreaking. Evelyn clicked the text file first. "Evie, if I couldn't deliver the lengthy version, here's the abridged one. I came to Gullhaven to thwart a theft and to ask you to marry me again, in the place where the light forgives the length of time I waited to propose. If I'm late, it's because I let a storm I should have confronted strike me from the side. This folder contains what the company wouldn't want exposed to the sunlight. The videos hold what you might want to hear in my voice, even if you never play them. If you do play them, forgive the lighting. I'm better at building frames than posing in them. M." Evelyn closed her eyes. The line about frames contained his smile. She allowed it to linger in the room, the way a choir holds a note to remind the air of its presence in the song. She opened 01_ video diary and Troy. MP4. Michael sat in a rented room, illuminated by the ubiquitous thrift store lamp found in every rented room, with the posture of a man who understands both how screws function and how people do. His hair was slightly longer. His mouth kept wanting to smile, then remembering it had a difficult task to perform first. "Evie," he said, and the way he pronounced her name navigated an ocean and reached its destination. "If I'm sending you this, it means I either lacked the courage to be brave when I should have been, or someone prevented me from ever being on time. I hope it's the former and that I'm an idiot you can tease for 50 more years." He explained heliotrope, the Brittany deaths, the falsified inspection logs, and how C4/Heliotrope recycled their offshore shell company names like sailors recycle curses. He named names and dates and attached contract PDFs with marginal notes. Noah leaned closer, his eyes hungry in the way truth makes a reporter hungry without transforming him into something he never wanted to be. He opened 02_ video diary _ the mark. MP4. "I found the symbol in the lighthouse ledger," he said. Arthur didn't know the page was missing yet. "Sailor's cipher. Harbor in sight. It's a promise you make when the worst is nearly over but not quite. I placed it where I knew you'd look if you trained yourself to avoid looking anywhere else." He smiled then, a small private smile. "You always find things beneath things, Evie. Beneath anger, the fear. Beneath a joke, the tenderness." An envelope lay nestled beneath the picture frame. Noah looked at Evelyn. His expression suggesting Michael's video had granted him permission to explore love as a form of investigation. Arthur swallowed, a practiced attempt at concealing his emotion, then swallowed again, the action betraying his composure. Evelyn clicked on 03_ video diary _ the other beginning. MP4. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. An expensive-looking chair that somehow felt cheap. "I told you I met you at the cafe," he said. "That's true. It's also true that I saw you the night before on the lighthouse steps, crying so quietly you made the wind feel clumsy. I watched from the path because I had no right to interrupt what you were doing with the sky. You wiped your face with your sleeve and said, 'Okay,' to nobody. I fell a little in love with the person who makes an agreement with nobody and keeps it." He looked down, and when he looked up again, a resolute glint shone in his eyes. "The other beginning is the one where I didn't speak," he said. "I kept that from you because I loved the version of our first words that made me look braver than I was. I wanted to be the man who sat beside you then. I want to be the man who sits beside you now even when I'm not there. If I fail to get back, it's because I got this town into the part of the story where it gets brave, and I paid for the ticket with the wrong currency. Evelyn paused the video, the sudden silence amplifying the weight of the moment. Arthur cleared his throat, breaking the tension. He was a good man, he said. Will be complicated later. Tonight we let good do what good is meant to do. Noah navigated to the Docs folder and whistled softly. The screen displayed engineering diagrams, lengthy email chains with subject lines like, easement activation plan, a memo concerning community outreach optics, and a spreadsheet. A column labeled risk, legacy designation showed mostly zeros until a cell containing heart caught his eye. Next to it a comment bubble read, monitor widow if she reappears. Rosa, having quietly entered the room through the connecting kitchen door, peered over Noah's shoulder, letting out a sound that would have curdled milk from a considerable distance. Monitor this, she said, immediately pulling out her phone to contact 3 individuals capable of mobilizing a large group of people with remarkable speed. Evelyn leaned back against the bed, her knees drawn up, her arms wrapped around them as if embracing a precious object. We take this to the state in the morning, she announced. And we make a copy and store it 12 different places. And tonight we follow the chart. Arthur nodded in agreement. Night water, he repeated, a note of approval in his voice. It's the hour when truth likes to dress up as rumor and go for a walk. Let's ask it to come aboard. Noah carefully closed the laptop and placed it in his bag with the gentle care one might show a child's drawing destined for a long journey. Evelyn rose, and for a fleeting moment, she wasn't the grieving widow who had journeyed north seeking answers. She was the woman Michael had described on the lighthouse steps, the woman who had quietly said okay to the night sky and meant it. Okay, she echoed, her words addressed to the men in the room, to the harbor, and to the part of herself that had been patiently waiting for the other beginning to catch up. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept across the night, its silent lesson a constant reminder that while darkness might not end, there's always a line to hold on to while navigating through it. The skiff pulled away from the pier, its engine seemingly hesitant. Arthur expertly handled the tiller, displaying the practiced ease of someone deeply familiar with the sea. Noah placed the waterproof case containing the flash drive between them, as if it were a passenger demanding respect and silence. Evelyn sat forward, the chart resting on her lap, harbor marks circled in ink nearly as dark as the water itself. Michael once told me he worked under another name, she said, her voice barely a whisper against the vastness of the night. I thought it was a union mix-up, but in the videos, Brittany, a second surname. She tasted the name foreign and unfamiliar on her tongue. Michael Ardent. Arthur spat over the side of the boat with the practiced disdain of a seasoned sailor. Ardent. I remember that name. European press linked him to the collapsed breakwater scandal. But the locals said he saved men when the company wouldn't. He came home carrying someone else's blame. Evelyn flattened the chart on her lap. He carried it so deep he never told me until it would protect me more than it would shame him. Noah leaned against the gunwale. Heliotrope used aliases for contracts too. He played their game once, and when he came here he was done playing. That makes him dangerous to them even after death. The lighthouse beam swept across the water, a slow, unwavering beacon. Evelyn felt its rhythm resonate within her chest. Then let's make him dangerous in the right direction. The skiff veered toward Gull's Tooth Reef, where waves crashed against jagged rocks, creating a frothy white spectacle. Arthur shut off the engine. We don't dive far, he said. We dive sure. The dive was brief, unforgivingly cold, and relentlessly harsh. At the designated coordinates, Evelyn's hand encountered metal pressed against the rock. A waterproof tube chained to the reef, a stubborn symbol of truth. Together, they hauled it into the skiff. Back on shore, they carefully pried open the seals. Inside, the missing ledger page from 1874, and numerous contracts, each bearing Heliotrope's sigil and signatures that precisely matched the altered entries in the guest book. Noah gently dried a page with meticulous care. "This is fraud wrapped in weather," he whispered. "Enough to drag them into courtrooms across 3 states. Arthur's lantern cast a warm glow on his weary face. "Your man trusted you with the kind of cargo sailors die to deliver." At dawn, Evelyn carried the page into Rose's cafe. The morning rush hadn't yet begun. Only Rose's nephew, sleeves rolled up, was busy wiping down tables. He froze at the sight of the tube. "I wasn't supposed to keep secrets this big," he confessed, his voice cracking with emotion. "Michael gave me a package the week before, said, 'If she comes back, give her this.' Then the man with the jacket cornered me behind the shed, and it was gone. I thought I'd failed him." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fail him. You kept enough of the thread for me to find the rest." The boy nodded vigorously, tears mingling with soap and salt. "Then you finish it for him." That night, back in her room, Evelyn meticulously examined the contracts. A mark appeared at the bottom of several, not Michael's handwriting this time, but a cipher used as a stamp by someone long deceased. She compared it to the etching on the bench plank, to the drawing in Michael's square of paper. Then it clicked. The mark wasn't merely safe water in sight. It was also a navigational cipher employed by 19th-century lighthouse keepers to indicate a hidden harbor. "Harbor in sight," she murmured, a realization dawning on her. "But also harbor found." She traced the 3 coordinates. Lighthouse, Reef, Cove. They formed a triangle. Within that triangle lay the wreck route Arthur had described. It wasn't simply a place of rescue. It was protected waters under maritime law. The headland wasn't just a lighthouse, it was a declared sanctuary zone. When she showed Noah, a grin spread across his exhausted face. "That's the nail in their coffin. State law can't override a federal maritime sanctuary." Arthur slapped the table with a resounding thud. "Then tomorrow we don't just bring them evidence. We bring them a bell loud enough to wake a judge." The next dive was more challenging. Their target was Sable Mouth Cove, where Michael's final mark faintly glowed in her memory. The water was colder, darker, a daunting expanse that demanded humility. Evelyn dove with Noah at her side. Their lights cut through the murky green-black water, scattering fish like startled whispers. Beneath a ledge wedged against the stone, they found another tube. This one bore Michael's initials and the year, etched with the same knife he had used to carve her name into a porch railing. They brought it to the surface and broke the seal. Inside, the complete ledger page, dated and notarized, detailing the council's 1874 declaration that Mariner's Light and its surrounding waters were to be preserved for refuge in perpetuity. Beside it, Michael had included a flashcard with his voice recording. "If you're holding this, it means you trusted me enough to finish what we started. Harbor in sight, Evie." Evelyn sat in the skiff, the tube resting across her knees, the gentle rocking of the tide mirroring the turmoil within her. "He wasn't just leaving me breadcrumbs," she said softly. "He was making sure I couldn't get lost." News spread with the swiftness of the tide. By afternoon, the gym was once again filled. This time not with questions, but with townspeople clutching photographs, stories, and copies of Michael's evidence Noah had already released online. Reporters from Portland and Boston crowded the back wall. The company representative looked pale, his composure shaken. The fixer in the jacket sat near the exit, his restlessness palpable, his phone in his hands. Arthur stood and cleared his throat, but his words weren't directed into a microphone. They were aimed at the storm bell he had wheeled inside on a dolly, the actual bell salvaged from the lighthouse tower years before. He struck it once, the booming sound echoing through the rafters. "Michael Hart asked me to ring this when it mattered," Arthur said. "It matters now." Evelyn stepped forward, holding the tube and the ledger page. "This isn't just my husband's fight," she declared. "This is a promise your ancestors made when they declared this place a refuge forever. A company tried to erase it. A widow and a town refused to let them." Noah raised his phone, live-streaming the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the tide has turned. And it's not theirs to own." The crowd erupted, a cacophony of anger, relief, defiance, and love. The fixer slipped out the side door, But he left behind what mattered most. A town that had awakened. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The flash drive glowed in her thoughts like a persistent ember. She opened the folder marked Video Diary Final. MP4. Michael's face filled the screen, weary but resolute. His voice held the gravity of a man who had completed the easier aspects of love, and now confronted the more difficult ones. Evie, he said, when I came back here I wasn't just fighting them. I was planning to ask you to marry me again. Not new vows but the same ones spoken where the light could hear. I bought a brass key from Arthur, the one he gave you. It was supposed to open a lantern room filled with promise. If I'm late, it means I gave this fight every ounce I had. And I want you to finish it with the strength we built together. Harbor in sight, love. Always. The video ended. Evelyn rested her forehead on her knees, tears flowing, not with the raw sobs of her earlier grief, but with a more settled sorrow that had transformed into resolve. As dawn painted the horizon pink, she climbed the lighthouse steps, the brass key clutched in her hand. The lantern's glass caught the first light, splitting it into a spectrum of colors. Yes, she whispered to the stillness, answering the question Michael never had the chance to ask again. The council chamber was overflowing. Townsfolk leaned against the walls, reporters filled the aisles, and state officials took their seats, notebooks open. Evelyn and Noah placed the ledger page and contracts in front of the microphone. This, Noah said, raising the page high, is the council's own 1874 declaration. It makes the lighthouse and its waters a sanctuary. Fraudulently erased, hidden, nearly destroyed but alive. Mrs. Hart recovered it with her husband's map. Evelyn added, her voice steady and unwavering. Michael Hart died trying to stop this theft. He left behind proof that our headland belongs to the people, not to a corporation's ledger. The company representative leaned into the microphone, sweat glistening on his brow. These accusations. Noah cut him off sharply. A live stream's running. Thousands are watching. Would you like to lie to the state and to the widow of the man your company targeted? The fixer in the jacket stood abruptly, his jaw clenched tight, and barked. This isn't over. But Rose's nephew, armed with his phone, shouted back. It's already online. The crowd erupted, cheers, stamping feet, voices rising in a wave of collective emotion. The chairwoman banged her gavel. The easements are void. This council will forward all evidence to the state attorney's office. Meeting adjourned. The representative and fixer left under a barrage of boos. Evelyn closed her eyes, hearing in the uproar the resonant echo of Michael's bell. Later that evening, Arthur found Evelyn on the lighthouse path, sitting on the backward seat. He carried something wrapped in oilcloth. I've held this too long, he said softly, placing it in her hands. Michael gave it to me before the accident. Said, she'll come back. Don't give it to her until she's ready. I wasn't sure what he meant. Now I am. It was a letter sealed, Michael's handwriting clearly visible on the front. For Evie, on the day she forgives me for waiting. Her breath hitched. She turned the envelope over and over before whispering, why didn't you give it to me sooner? Arthur's voice was rough with emotion. Because grief was already heavy enough. I thought the letter might drown you. I was wrong. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. Thank you, she said. Her words encompassing not just the letter but also the years Arthur had faithfully guarded a promise that wasn't his own. She climbed the lantern room steps at dawn, Michael's letter clutched tightly in her hand. The sea churned below with its usual restless energy. The light turned, steady and unwavering. She broke the seal. Evie, the day we met wasn't the cafe. It was the night before when you sat on these steps and whispered okay to the dark. I loved you from that moment, though I pretended I didn't until I had coffee as an excuse. I waited too long to tell you. I don't want to wait anymore. If I could, I'd stand here with you and ask, will you say okay again, this time to a future with me? If I am gone, then know this. I never left you. Every mark I left was just to lead you home. Harbor in sight. Always. Michael. Her tears blurred the words, but she didn't need her eyes to understand their meaning. She placed the letter on the glass, where the beam bathed it in golden light. I say okay, she whispered. I always did. The state investigators filed charges. The company retreated, its reputation in ruins. The headland was once again declared a protected maritime sanctuary. On a clear morning, Evelyn stood on the cliff where the lighthouse's shadow stretched into the grass. She opened a small tin, scattering Michael's compass and a sprig of cedar into the wind. The gulls cried out in approval, the tide absorbed the memory, and the light turned, its patient lesson etched across the sea. Noah stood at a respectful distance. Rosa and Arthur waved from the path, the entire town standing behind her. Evelyn breathed in the salt air, a mixture of grief and something new, something akin to freedom. She touched the brass key in her pocket, Michael's final gift. We began here, she said aloud. We keep beginning. The lighthouse beam swept across the landscape, steady and unwavering. Harbor in sight. Always.